Florida's Republican Governor Ron DeSantis will reportedly visit the battleground of Pennsylvania next month. According to the Philadelphia Inquirer, he's set to speak to a local chapter of the Republican Party on May 20th. It comes amid growing speculation DeSantis is considering a potential 2024 presidential bid. Conservative excitement around him appears to be rising, as the Philadelphia Inquirer reports, quote, a visit to Pennsylvania could further raise his profile in one of the country's key battlegrounds. And the reporter behind that story, Jonathan Tamari, joins me now. Hi there, Jonathan. Welcome. Thanks very much for being with us. So you wrote that word of Governor DeSantis' visit spread during a local Republican Party event in central Pennsylvania last week. Who attended that, and what was the purpose of that meeting?
So the purpose of that meeting was to start sizing up some of the Pennsylvania candidates for governor and Senate in 2022. The state has two wide open elections for those two seats. The governor is term limited. The incumbent Senator Pat Toomey, a Republican, has said he's not running for re-election. So those are really going to be two of the biggest elections in the country next year. The governor's seat, is the leader of one of the biggest states in the country. That Senate seat could potentially decide control of the Senate. It's probably Democrats' best opportunity to gain a seat in the Senate in 2022. And so there's a wide range of Republican candidates who are considering running for that seat and trying to become the face of the party in Pennsylvania, after President Donald Trump, post-Trump. And so a number of county chairs, party insiders, party committee members met there with a dozen or so of these candidates or potential candidates for governor and Senate to try to size them up here in the early going, because on the Republican side, there's not an obvious candidate for either of those seats. There's not somebody with big statewide stature right now. So there's a lot of people to consider, to go over, and to kind of figure out who's going to lead the party in Pennsylvania going forward.
It is the early going. So what can you tell us about Governor DeSantis' planned speech in Pennsylvania next month?
So as far as we've heard, he's coming on May 20th to Allegheny County, which is the county that is home to Pittsburgh and a number of suburbs out there, to speak to the Allegheny County Republican Party. That party hosted Ted Cruz a year ago. So obviously they have some ability to draw some of these national Republican names there. It's obviously an opportunity for him to kind of introduce himself to people who may have only seen him from afar. It's an opportunity for people in Pennsylvania to size up somebody who is in the very early goings here, seen as a potential presidential candidate. And it's a chance for him, honestly, probably to make some connections with donors and other influencers in the Pittsburgh area, and in an area of the state outside of Allegheny County. That's a pretty blue area, but immediately outside it, there's a lot of conservative votes, a lot of pro-Trump votes in that area, and he'll have the media attention and probably draw some people who come to visit from those areas to really introduce himself as people start to look ahead to what his future may hold.
And help us understand, Jonathan, what those voters are looking for. I mean, why do you think that Governor DeSantis' political star appears to be on the rise among conservatives?
So, there's a few things to it. One, when you talk about probably the biggest issue of the past year, the coronavirus and the government response to it, he has had a much less restrictive approach than a lot of Democratic governors. He's gotten some criticism for it, but he's also won some praise from the right for having less economic restrictions. The results, the state's, per capita cases, the deaths per capita have ended up kind of in the middle of the pack nationwide. So it hasn't been, some people predicted would be a disaster, has not been, the worst, among the worst of the states in the country, as I said, more towards the middle. So I think that is a big thing, especially in Pennsylvania. A lot of conservatives have been really angry about the way that the Governor Wolf, the Democrat, that his restrictions they felt were too stringent in Pennsylvania. And so that's a big contrast. He's done some pragmatic things, DeSantis, in Florida that have maybe surprised some people on the environment. But he also still retains that kind of anti-media, anti-elite attitude, that kind of combative attitude that drew a lot of people to President Trump, and that I think still appeals to a lot of Republicans, particularly in that part of Pennsylvania where they do feel like, separated from Philadelphia and other big cities. And so I think that combination of things has made him at least an intriguing figure on the right.
You talked about already how the governor's handling of the pandemic in Florida might be viewed by voters in Pennsylvania. You also mentioned, though, the environment, because it is an interesting issue to look at through that lens of Florida, because, as you noted, Governor DeSantis has taken some steps that would be very much in keeping with what some environmentalists have been looking for, because tourism is very much part and parcel of the economy, we know, and so preserving the environment, has made for some interesting alliances in Florida on that measure. Does that at all factor in with conservatives because of issues like fracking that have been so polarizing? Things like, the continued look at transitioning away from fossil fuels. We know those are issues that a lot of conservative voters have paid close attention to as well.
Yes, and especially in Pennsylvania, and especially in that part of Pennsylvania, of southwest Pennsylvania, where there is a lot of fracking, this long history of coal jobs and steel jobs out there. So heavy industry is something in that region of the state that is valued. And even as those jobs have really shrunk and those industries have shrunk, a lot of people still feel connected to it. So that could be a factor. I think obviously, a lot of his environmental steps have been more about, as you noted, tourism, about preserving the Everglades down there. I think that aspect of his record is something that might appeal to some of the more kind of donor types, some of the more party elites who see him as somebody who can be pragmatic and technocratic on some issues while still retaining some of that combativeness that drew a lot of voters to President Donald Trump.
All right, we'll be watching to see what it is that the governor says there in Pennsylvania. Jonathan Tamari for us. Jonathan, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.